Commodore Champion.
Thanks, Brad. They taught me at Staff College to have a intro, a body and a conclusion, but I think I'll go straight from the intro to the conclusion and we'll see how we go. I want to start with a story because I think stories matter about allies and partners, and end with allies and partners as well. If we get a bit of time, I'll just talk a little bit about grey zone deterrence in the middle because I think that's a unique challenge that many of us face, certainly in PACOM as well. So the fact that we have myself as an embedded general officer, fully integrated in PACOM, is a powerful signal. And that really speaks to the trust that we share as an alliance. So I briefed the PLA Air Force Staff College, the PACOM brief, when they visited PACOM last year. Now, they just could not fathom having an Australian general officer embedded, fully integrated in PACOM, briefing that brief. They couldn't reconcile it, couldn't rationalise it. My simple reply was, we have allies, and it's strong and it's a powerful message. Now, I noticed we've got we heard from the DepSec Gen before as well. Now, I also spent time in CCOMC and SHAPE, non-NATO country, but fully integrated in the CCOMC in the Afghanistan team in NATO at SHAPE. I found myself at one point on an SVTC representing NATO on Afghanistan, on drawdown and reconstitution, and the transition into resolute support. I was speaking to an Australian two-star at the other end, representing CENTCOM. A little bit weird, but a powerful message, a really powerful message. Now, if you subscribe to the fact that history is an unending dialogue between the past and the present, then history and values really do matter. So this year, the US and Australia share 100 years of mateship, forged at the Battle of Hemel in 1918, 4th of July in fact. So commanded by Australian General John Monash, and arguably a turning point in the war. So gunner Philip Henry Champion, my grandfather, was there at the Battle of Hemel, a piano tuner from Brisbane. Needless to say, after working heavy artillery, his career as a piano tuner ended when the war finished. And you can just see the recruiting sergeant now when he joined up, piano tuner, you'll go well in artillery, son. So history, the point of that is that history and values really do matter. And in some ways, the values that we share as an alliance and partnership actually are as strong as the technology and the technology we seek to integrate as well. So we should not forget our shared values. Now, the term deterrence covers a broad remit. So I just want to quickly look at some of the Indo-PACOM challenges in the emerging great power competition in the AOR, and more specifically, how we deal with the Phase 01 construct. So we were privileged last Friday to have Charles Edel, who's in Canberra. He's an American working at the US Studies Institute in Canberra. He was a guest speaker. Now, Charlie rightly pointed out that at least in terms of great power competition for the past several decades, US policy is focused on reducing tensions and narrowing areas of disagreement. Now, arguably, and in retrospect, by privileging cooperation and stability above all else, this has also ceded some level of strategic initiative. Grey zone actors have conducted probes which are specifically designed not to cross the threshold of military intervention. And because most of these probes have not been met with counter pressure, this has allowed these actors to gradually and incrementally, in time and space, to secure gains. Now, another US Army War College report, also contributed to by one H.R. McMaster, from last year, titled Outplayed, concluded that purposeful grey zone revisionist actors are successfully campaigning and achieving warlike objectives inside the steady state or deterrence phases of the US-NATO joint phasing model. Now, the study also concluded that US concepts for campaign design, the employment of forces and the use of force are not well adapted to persistent grey zone competition and conflict. And that's a point well made. And the point I would make there, that is in Phase 0 and 1, the integration of the interagency is integral and fundamental to how we go about business. And to the point where, for example, a commerce or a treasury sanction against a revisionist actor can have far more weight than what we can do as a DoD with the authorities we have in Phase 0 and 1. So integration with the interagency and how we go about business, and with allies and partners and their respective interagencies as well, is fundamental to Phase 0 and 1 and grey zone competition. Now, while revisionist actors seem to embrace a level of ambiguity, we have arguably remained anchored in a more binary model of peace and war. So I think SecDef's message is very clear. We need to adopt a more integrated concept for campaigning where we can provide coherent options, short of armed conflict, to achieve policy objectives. The space between cooperation, competition and conflict. In other words, a renewed focus on campaigning. As I said before, that's also where the interagency plays a key role. Now, deterrence in the grey zone is a fascinating subject, but I think the real game changer, as has been espoused by all speakers, is allies and partners, something that revisionist actors tend to have few of. Now, the Indo-Pacific covers 50% of the Earth's surface. Strategy requires aligning our limited means with our extensive interests across the region that has become the global centre of gravity. Now, this can only be achieved multilaterally and in partnership. And despite what actors like China may perceive, the Indo-Pacific is too big for one power to dominate. It is made for multipolarity and a diversity of partnerships, and it is here that we have the deterrent advantage. Now, we're guilty of this in PACOM as well. We often characterise the Sino-US relationship in a binary function. We look at Chinese force structure versus US force structure and projections of Chinese defence spending outstripping US defence spending by, say, 2020 or 2030 or whatever projection it is this week. Now, this way of characterisation, I believe, actually plays into the adversary narrative. Now, if you characterise this across the entire Allied enterprise in PACOM, insert Korea, insert Japan, insert Australia, for example, then the enterprise actually far outstrips what China will ever get to in 2040 in terms of force structure and also in terms of defence spending. What does that look like if defence spending is not just 2%? What does it look like if it's 2.5%? What does it look like if it's 3%? Even at 2%, it will outstrip what China can achieve in 2040. So as a way of highlighting, and in conclusion, highlighting the strengths of the Allied integration within the overall deterrent framework, I would challenge everyone in this room to think multilaterally and to think through the policy settings that will allow us to do that. We need 5th-gen platforms and we need 5th-gen policy to actually integrate us and pull us together. Thank you.
General Kajiwara, thank you.
Thank you. It is my great honor and pleasure to be able to be here representing Joint Staff Japan for the first time. Japan has been facing great changes in its strategic environment today. North Korea now has ballistic missiles equipped with nuclear warheads. China has been rigorously building up its military capability, both quantitatively and qualitatively, and continues its maritime advancement. Russia has been reorganizing its military capabilities and increasing its activities in the Far East. In such circumstances, the question of deterrence is serious and urgent more than ever for Japan. And our relationship with the United States is absolutely essential when we think about deterrence and assurance, given the defensive nature of Japan's defense policy. With regard to deterrence, the central question for Japan is how to cope with the rise of China. The rapid increase of its military capability and its attitude of not to hesitate to change status quo backed by force constitutes serious concern for Japan. As for China, there are two challenges for Japan. One is challenge against Japan's territorial integrity in the East China Seas. Another is challenge against maritime and international order over the Indo-Pacific region, including the South China Seas. The first challenge, the challenge against territorial integrity, is related to the Senkaku Islands near Taiwan. Japanese government does not acknowledge the existence of the territorial dispute because there is no room for question, both historically and legally, and Japan exercises effective control over the island. However, Chinese military build-up and active operation in recent years have raised serious concern. Since this issue is, for the first hand, about Japan's own sovereignty, it is Japanese responsibility to strengthen its military capability. Having said that, from deterrence and assurance perspective, the following three points are important. The first is coordinated bilateral strategic communication about the U.S. commitment to the defense of Senkaku Islands based on the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty. The second is to maintain common understanding through strategic discussions at all levels between the United States and Japan. And the third is bilateral coordination of activities such as combined exercises, presence operations, and so on. It is essential for us not to let China make strategic miscalculation through such efforts. At the same time, it is also important to maintain necessary communication channels with China to prevent unwanted escalation in contingency. The recent agreement between Japan and China over maritime and air communication mechanism is a first step, I think. The second challenge is about maritime and international order. Japan has been advocating the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, and the guiding idea is the maritime and international order based on the rule of law. From that viewpoint, Chinese action, which contradicts with international norms over the region, is also to be deterred or checked. It is important to make China aware of the cost of such action. And in addition, it is also important to let countries in the region recognize that there is potential risk in their relationship with China, and that there is a choice for them other than depending on China. To make such effort effective and efficient, allies and like-minded countries need to collaborate and cooperate closely in order to consolidate diplomatic, economic, and military efforts across the countries. Well, finally, I'd like to add one thing. In executing this approach, we need to be careful not to force countries to choose either China or the other, because such attitude could be counterproductive given their current relationship with China. In the area like Indo-Pacific, it is more true when you say, if you are in a hurry, go around. Thank you.